For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith here with Chris Treviño for instant analysis from USC's 42-25 win over Arizona State here in the Coliseum. Chris, what were your overall thoughts from today's game?
It was definitely an interesting game, Jack. USC's coming off that performance up in Corvallis where they did not have the offensive output that USC fans have been used to through the first course of the season, and a really, really good defensive effort. Today, Saturday night, at the Coliseum, I know many people considered it a get-right game with this Arizona State program that was limping 1-3. We got to see some good. We got to see some bad for both sides of the ball. But overall, USC came out. They got back on track offensively. They did have their first turnover, but they put up 42 points, as you mentioned, got back over the 42-point mark. And the defense did have some struggles in the first half. They did get a turnover, but they came correct. In the second half, made some adjustments, came back with some energy and some intensity on kind of an emotional night. I just wanted to add that, this program, USC, Lincoln Riley, they honored Dave Nickel, USC's former inside receivers coach, who unfortunately passed away during the offseason. They had his family here, some of his friends here. They honored him with a moment of silence before the game, and they gave him his family and his friends the game ball in the locker room. So an emotional night, and the defense definitely brought more of that intensity. The defense did in the second half. So some good, some bad, lots of things to talk about. Some injuries, some new faces out there, some first, but overall a good win for USC, which has surpassed last season's win total of 4 wins at their 5-0, number 6 in the country. So feeling pretty good.
Lincoln Riley did mention it was an emotional week just knowing what this game meant to the Trojan program. They're going to wear decals on their helmets for the rest of the season. He considers road wins in the conference to be gold. I'm sure he'd consider this to be silver. A win is a win. They are 5-0. So let's start at the offense, where we said they got right a little bit and they were back on track scoring 40-plus points. That started at the quarterback position with Kayla Williams, who might have been at his best all season tonight. What did you think of Kayla's performance?
Caleb was great. He had some issues with the offensive line. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but offensive line wasn't as crisp as we've seen. Some of the blocks Arizona State was able to get through, caused some chaos for them in the backfield, but Caleb was straight magician back there. There were so many plays where he slipped out, got away, kept the play going, extended, made some crazy throws, just some jump pass throws, and just showed the athleticism and the toughness, had some big runs. I believe he finished with 44 rushing yards on the ground and a rushing touchdown, 3 passing touchdowns through the air, 348 yards. I believe that is a season high for him, but got it done, a reset game for him as he did struggle offensively against the Oregon State Beavers. And we got to talk to him a little bit about coming off that game because, as you know, he was not available to talk the week going into this game, and he kind of said, his mindset wasn't any different than he had going into this game or for last week. He wanted to really get back to the basics. He watched the tape of Oregon State and he said, my footwork wasn't there. I was getting a little bit sloppy. The things I do well, those basics were off. So that's where usually I have to go back as a quarterback, go back to the basics, get the mechanics right, get the motion in. He looked a lot more confident out there, got some short throws going. Jordan Addison, Mario Williams got those plays going, got him more into a rhythm, spread the ball out. Terrell Bynum was not available, one of the senior wide receivers. So definitely a lot of guys had to step up. Kyron Ware-Hudson, Brendan Rice had a big game as well. We'll talk more about that. But overall, Caleb led a really, really good offense. And he did seem to be a little bit winded in the game at times because he was running around a lot, making plays with his feet, moving the ball. But they did a really good job. There were a couple times where they stalled out. They had a tough drive or two. But overall, the offense definitely got back on track. Kayla Williams, a big night to move forward. And they're going to need him, with 2 big defensive teams they're going to be facing in the next couple weeks. Really good to get him back right here in the Coliseum, but a really good night for Kayla Williams. And Lincoln Riley said as much. He thought he did really well, minimal mistakes, did have a turnover in the end zone, probably a throw he'd wish to have back into double coverage, but overall a really, really solid effort for number 13.
Yeah, he said he took this week just as he would take any other week. Just because he played poorly against Oregon State didn't mean he was going to change up the way he prepares, and I think USC fans would be happy with the way he came out in the Coliseum. He looked on fire, and one thing I thought he definitely improved on was his ability to throw on the run with a kind of makeshift offensive line that had Gino Quinones in there. You still had the switches at left tackle. He had to be on the run a lot. He made some great throws, including one I think it was over on this side of the field to Brendan Rice on the 3rd down that was just running on the wrong side of his body, making just a crazy throw that only Kayla Williams could make. I thought he was just definitely at his best for the Trojans. And even Travis Dye, when he was asked about how does he escape all those pockets, said, I mean, it's just black magic. Like, he doesn't know how it happens, and I don't think we have an answer for it either, because you just cannot bring down Kayla Williams. Let's move on to maybe some of the weapons that he was throwing to, because I personally thought this was the most consistent all-around game that USC got from their weapons, whether you're talking about Jordan Addison, who went over 100 yards, Mario Williams, who had a good game and could have had an even bigger one if not for a big touchdown called back, all the way to the running back, some of the tight ends, other receivers. What did you think about USC's weapons?
Yeah, definitely spreading the ball out. As you mentioned, Jordan Addison. Still Jordan Addison, Blitnikoff winner. Mario Williams probably should have had a touchdown in this game, but Kyle Ford getting involved. He came close to getting a touchdown. Brendan Rice had his best game of the season, like that big grown man touchdown, or not touchdown, excuse me, third down grab that he had right at the sticks. You know, that saved a drive, and you know that's kind of the what we envisioned for Brendan Rice. 6'2", 210 pounds. The big man, I think they need to get him more involved, get that big man receiver going. Malcolm Epps had a really nice touchdown. He even joked later that Brendan Rice in the media room was yelling, "You stole my touchdown, you stole my touchdown." So they're having a little fun about it. But another touchdown for the tight end, excuse me. Raleek Brown looked like he had his juice back, you know, making some guys miss in the backfield. Travis Dye, little man, grow man, just still running hard with that mustache, powering away. Kyron Ware-Hudson, as you mentioned, had his first career touchdown as a Trojan, big moment. He also had a really nice diving catch in the first half to keep a drive alive. So just a lot of guys stepping up with Terrell Bynum out, one of the senior veterans. So everyone was trying to get some reps. Taj Washington had some nice grabs too. So all those weapons are starting to really come together. You know, it's not just Mario Williams and Jordan Addison. Taj Washington has also had a big role in this, but we're seeing tonight here, you know, Caleb's starting to look a little more to his other guys, having a little more trust in those other guys, getting Raleek Brown healthy. This offense, it's still deadly. It's getting a little bit deadlier, Jack, but, you know, some things got to be healthy up front for the Trojans.
And I think a lot of people question, you know, you have all these receivers, you have all these tight ends, running backs. How are you going to keep everyone happy? It really seems like they just play unselfishly throughout the entire season. They really embody the I'm going to get mine eventually kind of role, because you even saw Josh Follow, the backup tight end, coming in and playing a lot. I'm not sure he even had a target in this game, but he was blocking his butt off. He was doing a fantastic job. Same with Mario Williams, who always loves to block. It's like these guys are just going to patiently wait till Kayla Williams finds him, and eventually he is. You're going to have a game like this where you spread it around to everyone. You did hint at the offensive line. We did see some shifts along the offensive line. Justin Dedich didn't play a single snap, didn't get the start. Gino Quinones did instead. We saw some rotation around left tackle. What was your thought process about the offensive line today?
Right, we knew Justin Dedich has been banged up for several weeks. He's been having that leg kind of taped up, mummified with that band, that stretcher. Not really sure what it's helping, if it's the hamstring, if it's the Achilles. Not really sure there. We don't have a specific answer, but you know, he didn't come out for the coin toss of the captain's meeting, and, you know, right there, Gino Quinones taking the first team snaps. And, you know, this was a game, as Lincoln Riley said, that they thought they wanted to get him healthy. They needed to get him rest, especially when you have a Washington State coming into the Coliseum next week, and then the big game, everyone's got circled, Utah, possibly a college game day. Just so important that you're healthy up front and key up front. So they thought this was a game where they can kind of give him some rest, get him a little bit healthier, you know, moving forward. And Gino Quinones is a guy they've really talked up. So it was nice to see Lincoln Riley, you know, throw that faith into the backup. You know, they really didn't have any choice, but it's nice to see that they were confident in going with him. And he said, you know, this was a tough assignment for Gino just because he hasn't played a lot, and we could definitely tell on the sidelines, and you and me watching, you know, he was huffing and puffing. You know, his endurance was a question for this game just because he hasn't had not a lot of time, and this offense likes to go up and down the field, so that was going to be a challenge for him. And Arizona State, as Lincoln Riley said, is probably the best interior defense that they've faced. There were some big bodies in there, so it was a big test for Gino in that interior, and I think he did pretty well. He did have a false start to start the game, a little bit of nerves, but overall I think he held up well, and just vital experience for the backups, especially interior, where they really have struggled to build that depth. Getting a guy like Gino his first career start and a full game, that's huge for moving forward. And you hope Justin Dedich, a team captain, is healthy moving forward, but they got a little bit better by building some depth with Gino.
Yeah, Travis Dye mentioned he stepped up in a big way. He was really emphasizing that, like, he did a great job, and he echoed Lincoln Riley saying that's just we might not face a better interior defensive line for the rest of the season. We saw some rotation at left tackle because we see rotation at left tackle every game, but it kind of seemed like they might have found a guy towards the end of the second half. Cortland Ford was the one that was called for a holding on the long Mario Williams touchdown that was not to be, and it looked like we saw Bobby Haskins for the entire rest of the game. So do you think that maybe signals a big switch that USC is ready to make at left tackle?
there's been talk of that. We'll pick a guy when the guy emerges. Maybe that's Haskins. We have to talk to Cortland and Bobby and Lincoln Riley moving forward. So obviously they pulled him after that Cortland after that big holding call that wiped off a touchdown, killed that momentum. But it might have been like his ankle was bothering him. We don't really know for sure. I didn't really see him on the sideline that much. Maybe pulling at it. So it's possible they just decided to. It was kind of like a benching, like, hey, you kind of messed up big here. Or maybe he came out and says, the ankle's just not there for me, so decided to sit him. But whatever the case, Bobby Haskins, has been playing well. He's been healthy, so I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Haskins start moving forward. But I would still expect to see some of that rotation because Cortland Ford was playing really well before the ankle injury. So maybe it's just he's not fully 100% despite what Lincoln Riley said. But we'll have to see in practice and such what moves forward. But I would expect to see a little bit the rotation, but I feel like Bobby definitely is the guy because he's the healthiest and he made minimal mistakes compared to Cortland.
And we touched on pretty much every facet of the offense. Let's get to the defense a little bit. For the defense, it was really a tale of two halves. The first half, they couldn't really stop Arizona State. The second half, they were a lot more stingy, had a lot more of the edge, which is what Eric Gentry mentioned. So what was your overall assessment of the way the defense played tonight?
Definitely a tale of two halves, and we've seen the first half defense. We've seen them give up plays. We've seen them bend. We've seen them, hold them to field goals. But the only difference is we weren't seeing any turnovers in the first half. Usually that performance in the first half would come with, a fumble or a random pick to kill a drive, but didn't see that. So it looked a lot worse to USC fans because they're so used for the number one turnover team in the country in this defense. They were used to getting some of those plays, to cheer about after getting gashed for several yards. And Emory Jones, he's a big quarterback, Jack. You could probably tell in the broadcast he's 6'3", big arm, strong. He was tough to bring down. There were times where he slipped out of a sack, and USC fans know what that feels like when Kayla Williams gets out of a sack from the opposing defense. So he was tough to bring down, big body quarterback. But the defense in the second half, I tweeted it out. After they forced a punt to open up the third quarter, they got their edge back. They're playing with a little more edge, and Eric Gentry said as much. Because he said earlier in the week, his old team, Arizona State, where he transferred from, he said, it's just another game. But he admitted in the post-game presser, it felt a little bit weird out there. And I can imagine that's true going against your former team, guys who recruited you, guys you shared a locker room with, shared battles with, going up against them in a battle yourself. And he said he just didn't feel like himself. He was playing timid in that second half. He's the Mike linebacker. The Mike linebacker sets the tone. The Mike linebacker sets that edge. And, out of the second half, he decided to play Eric Gentry football and kind of lead that defense and play with that edge, and you definitely saw it in the second half. I believe they were averaging close to 9 yards a carry or per play, and after that it was under 4 or something like that, Jack. So they definitely did their part, held them to 8 points, a 2-point conversion. The only touchdown being a weird drive that we'll talk about, but overall, just they brought that intensity. They got to the quarterback, 5 sacks on the game. They got in the backfield. They definitely look like that team we saw in Corvallis, that team that was playing with edge and an FU mentality kind of deal. And that's kind of what we saw in the second half. And that's why USC was able to pull away and end this and go 5-0.
Yeah, Alex Grinch shares the same opinion. He said they didn't play well in the first half, but they played well in the second half. Averaged 8.2 yards a play, Arizona State did in the first half, then only 3.3 in the second half. And in the first couple drives of the second half, USC looked maybe the best the defense looked all season. They were pretty much holding them to like 0.3 yards a play through the first couple drives of the second half. You had an interception at the end, which is, they at least got one turnover today, but the 5 sacks were big. There were more tackles for loss in the backfield, so the defense really came to play in the second half. They looked far more disciplined, as the first half they couldn't really set the edge. And then also just a lot better in pass protection or pass coverage. The weird drive you mentioned, a couple pass interference calls, a couple dropped interceptions, one of which was by Damani Jackson and ends up in the arms of the receiver on the ground, almost just like a lucky play. Brew McCoy-ish from a couple years ago, and then they end up punching it in the end zone late in the game. So I know Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley, after the Fresno State stop, they would say probably they're not very happy that ASU ended up in the end zone, but at that point, it feels like the game was over, and then weird onside kick stuff happens. But it was just a weird stretch of about 10 minutes that I thought the defense still played pretty well that one drive, and so that's the only points they gave up in the second half, so I thought they played much better.
Definitely a weird drive because it felt like USC is dominating defensively this drive, but PI calls, multiple PI calls, the weird play with Damani Jackson on third down where if he kind of just bats it down, it's over. USC's probably going to cover in this game, but there were a couple PI calls, and everyone was telling me, watching it on the broadcast, they were bad calls both sides. The one down here on USC in the end zone and the 2 on that drive, just not good calls by Pac-12 officiating. So what are you going to do? I mean, that's the way it was played. And yeah, if you erase some of those calls, USC's probably has a second half shutout. We don't know, but that's the way college football is, and they were able to get in points. But it did feel like USC was firmly in control. Onside kick a little bit, special teams. I wanted to touch on it briefly, where special teams becoming kind of a storyline, Jack, where they have multiple back-to-back kickoffs where they had a block in the back to move them forward, a muff punt, and then that onside kick where no one looked prepared for it. They got lucky. There was an illegal block, and they were able to get the Blitnikoff winner. Good on you, Arizona State, kicking to a Blitnikoff winner. That's a smart play. But they came out on top of that. But it's becoming a thing where possibly it's going to cost them, or something that's going to make it a really interesting game down the line. So special teams is definitely something they're going to have to go back and practice and kind of shore up moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned we're going to see two great games the next couple of weeks watching USC. They host Washington State, and then they go to Utah. The biggest game of the year, you would argue, for most Trojan fans would argue. You can't roll in with a poor special teams unit. You also mentioned that there were a couple of returns that got out past the 30-yard line. It seems like they were getting bigger chunks, which we didn't see against Oregon State. So special teams got to figure something out, especially the onside kick. Like, if you're coming down to the Utah game and you muff an onside kick, it's just not the way that USC would want to lose a game. You mentioned the defense, though. A couple of players that we haven't really talked about. Damani Jackson, Corey Foreman got in the game after seeing 0 snaps against Oregon State. Tyrone Taleni, Solomon Tuliapupu. It seems like just everyone on this defense, a lot like Oregon State, was getting in the game, making some big plays. I thought Damani Jackson looked good. Corey Foreman with a couple of pressures too. What were your thoughts about some of the maybe reserve players that we got to see a little bit more of today?
Yeah, I think it was cool just giving them more reps in big opportunities. Damani Jackson came out early in that second half where the game is still up in the air, so they gave him, that trust, like, hey, you earned this opportunity. Corey Foreman did not play a single snap in Corvallis. He might have played his most snaps that we've seen this season. We'll have to go back and check that after the tape's done, but he did have a nice little tackle on Emory Jones on a run to scramble to keep him short. So Latrell McCutcheon also got in, played some of that nickelback. Jacoby Covington got in. He did have one of those PI calls, but that looked like textbook pass breakup. So just a lot of guys stepping up, making plays, and it's all about getting the experience, Jack, because you never know who's going to need to step up when there's an injury or someone goes down. But it was really nice to see Corey Foreman get some snaps. He had some good pressure. Just got to finish more. Damani Jackson almost got his first interception. People would have gone crazy. Solo, huge sack in this game, and everyone was fired up. His second tackle for a loss this season. So a lot of good things for the reserve guys stepping up. Damani did have a penalty early in the first half, so growing stuff. He is a true freshman, hasn't played that much, but a lot of little things to like from guys stepping up and kind of the guys we don't talk about that much.
Yeah, and I think Phil mentioned a win is still a win, 42-25, though it wasn't the 25-point spread that a lot of people thought USC would blow through, since Arizona State is a little bit in shambles as a program. They give credit to Arizona State. They played tough. The offense looked good in the first half, not quite as good in the second half, and the defense, I'm not sure they had it for most of the game, but they kept it close, and they were an onside kick away if they really got that from making it a weird ball game at the end, but still a win for the Trojans. They're 5-0. They've got more wins this year than in the entirety of last year, but as we mentioned, they've got two tough games coming up. What are some things that you think they need to fix up before playing Washington State and Utah?
Well, definitely, special teams, as I mentioned, because special teams, those are games against good opponents like Utah. Washington State has proven to be very scrappy this year. They're kind of a surprise team, but special teams are kind of that difference. If you're both playing well on defense, you're both scoring on offense, why not the third factor of this game being special teams, where it can decide a win or a loss? So I think they really need to hit on that, especially going on the road to a loud environment like Utah in a couple weeks. The offense just needs to keep rolling, because you're going to need that offense to make plays on the road in Utah. So Washington State has a sneaky good defense, so this is going to be a nice little warm-up test for Kayla Williams and this offense. I'm not really sure what the line's going to look like. They need to shore that up a little more. That communication needs to be a little bit better. You got Gino in there. They just looked a little bit off early with Gino in there, because Justin Dedich is a former center. He is a center by trade, so having two centers on the line, that does wonders for the communication. So they need to get that back going, get Gino a little more confidence with the communication with that line if he has to start another game, and keep that offense rolling. Defensively, they kind of stick to the same script. You want to see that intensity early, so I would just say starting faster for the defense. Turnovers will come. They kept the streak going, but just playing with more intensity early, because you're going to need that intensity on the road, which I don't think that's going to be an issue for them, because they seem to embrace playing on the road. Eric Gentry, Shane Lee, these guys love bonding, taking in that hostile environment. So I think they're going to be okay, more so on the offense, but playing at home against this Washington State offense, you want to see them start fast on defense and kind of come out ready to punch people in the mouth. That's what you want to see. You want to see that second half team start in the first half. I know that's cliche, but that's how you win football games. That's how you dominate early. So I think those are the kind of the keys that USC needs to look for against, Washington State coming into town next week and then going on the road. Big Utah game.
All right, any more thoughts before we wrap this one up? Late night here at the Coliseum?
I think that I don't really have anything to add. We've talked a lot. I need some water. It's a little chilly. You didn't bring a jacket, so I feel bad for you. We got a great shot. Let's let them see the shot a little bit. We had to go for this one, so hope you guys enjoyed this one.
Well, anyways, that's all we've got for you guys today. We'll have YouTube content just for the next couple of days, and make sure you're going on to the site, uscfootball.com. Tons of great articles from the crew. Chris and I have got highlights coming out within the next couple of days as well. So that's all we've got for you guys today. For Chris Treviño, I'm Jack Smith. Instant Analysis. Make sure you check out uscfootball.com for more.